I'm pleased to introduce tonight a very distinguished gentleman and a great friend of Fee, a great personal friend, Brad Tompson. Before I tell you about his academic credentials, I want to quickly share a personal story. Brad has 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. One of his sons, Henry, came with his dad to my place back in, was it June of last year, maybe? May or June? May. Henry is how old is Henry? 16? 16. He is a bagpipe player. And so we sat on my back porch, which is down below within a fenced backyard, so the neighbors couldn't see us, but they sure heard us. And Henry, it's a very quiet neighborhood, and normally you don't hear anybody, don't see anybody, and so we just thought we were back there enjoying ourselves, and he played his first tune. And the moment he was done, all of a sudden, from all around the neighborhood, cheers went up. They loved it, even though they couldn't see who it was who was playing. Maybe they thought it was me. Brad Tompson is a professor of political science at Clemson University in South Carolina and the executive director of the Clemson Institute for the Study of Capitalism. We have talked extensively about new programs that Brad is working to put in place, and we're excited about the prospects of working much more closely with him and with Clemson in the months and years to come. He received his PhD at Brown University, and he has also been a visiting scholar at Princeton and Harvard universities and at the University of London. He's published 5 books, and I have the titles for you. One is Neoconservatism: An Obituary for an Idea. The award-winning book, John Adams and the Spirit of Liberty, Freedom and School Choice in American Education, Anti-Slavery Political Writings, 1833 to 1860, and The Revolutionary Writings of John Adams. He's currently completing his 6th book on the ideological origins of American constitutionalism. Dr. Tompson lectures all over the U.S. and around the world. His op-ed essays have appeared in dozens of newspapers in the U.S., and he appears regularly on television and radio. He's lectured on education reform, and his essays have appeared in scores of newspapers on that subject in the U.S. and abroad. His topic tonight is, why Marxism?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Larry, thank you very much for the kind words and the introduction. I was last at Fee 27 years ago as a much younger man and without any bagpipe players in my family at the time. But I'm absolutely delighted to be back at Fee. And let me also just say, a Grover Cleveland Democrat? I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, wonders never cease. I mean, next we'll be hearing about Thomas Jefferson Republicans. I'd like to dedicate my lecture tonight to a dear friend of mine, Alan Charles Kors. Who inspired me a couple of years ago to take up the cudgels against Mr. Marx. Tonight is this is my first talk on what Alan inspired me to do a couple of years ago. So the title of my talk tonight is Why Marxism?, which I think raises 2 important questions. First, why should any of us care about Marxism in a post-Marxist world? After all, the Berlin Wall fell almost 25 years ago, and communism seems dead just about everywhere. Second, why have so many people been attracted to Marxism over the years? Or maybe the better question is this: what kind of person is attracted to Marxism? In my view, we should still care about Marxism precisely because so many people are still attracted to it. Which means, of course, that it's not dead. Not by a long shot. In fact, Marxism seems to be making something of a comeback. Let's begin then with what we know about Marxism in theory and practice. In a remarkably short period of time, the philosophy of Karl Marx profoundly changed the course of human civilization. In fact, no system of ideas has transformed the world as quickly or as comprehensively as did the philosophy of Marx. Not even the moral teachings of Jesus or Muhammad. At the height of political Marxism's power and influence, half the world was under its dominion, and the other half feared that it too would succumb to communist imperialism. All that changed, of course, in 1989. When the Berlin Wall fell, the West saw for the first time the material and spiritual rot that lay within the Marxist-Leninist world. We now know the ugly truth. Marxism has led to rivers of blood and an ocean of tears wherever it has been tried. Consider the facts. The best new scholarship now tells us that between 1917 and 1989, over 100 million people were murdered by various Marxist regimes. Millions more were tortured, starved, exiled, enslaved, and sent to concentration camps. And whole cultures were liquidated. Did that go? One-party rule, collectivization, man-made famine, secret police, arrests, propaganda, censorship, ethnic cleansing, purges, show trials, re-education camps, gulags, firing squads, and the killing fields. All these defined life under communism. Whole new categories of antisocial crimes were created by the dictatorship of the proletariat. Under communism, for example, it became a crime punishable by death to be a member of the bourgeoisie, an enemy of the people, a counter-revolutionary, or a deviationist. Even those who were just skeptical or indifferent to the goals of the regime were labeled saboteurs and subject to imprisonment or worse. Nothing in the long span of human history comes close to the tyranny, terror, and mass genocide inspired by Marxism in power. Nothing. Not surprisingly, Marx seemed to disappear from college bookstores in the years after 1989. Not only had the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc imploded, but Western intellectuals seemed to give up, or at least to be embarrassed by their Marxist faith. At the time, most reasonable people assumed that Das Kapital would end up in the dustbin of history along with Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. Remarkably, though, that did not happen. Instead, Marxism simply went underground in the decade after 1989, reinventing itself and re-emerging under the guise of new academic methodologies, such as postmodernism, deconstructionism, semiotics, multiculturalism, feminism, and in new academic programs such as Black, Women's, Chicano, Critical, and Environmental Studies. The political correctness movement that swept college campuses in the 1980s represented what we might call the dictatorship of the professoriate. And so, even now, despite the poverty, tyranny, and death associated with socialism in practice, we still hear from mainstream intellectuals that Marxian socialism is a noble ideal still worth fighting for. Western intellectuals have worked very hard to exonerate Marxism from any responsibility for the tyranny and genocide associated with communism in practice. They assure us ad nauseum that the problem is not with Marxist theory, but with what they call unforeseen historical circumstances, and with the mistakes of well-meaning but misguided revolutionaries. Marxist tyrants, such as Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot, were aberrations, we're always told, deviationists from true Marxism. Stalinism, Maoism, or Pol Potism may be responsible for millions dead, but never Marxism. Real socialism, we are told repeatedly, has not yet been tried. We should not be entirely surprised to learn, then, that Marx seems to be making something of a comeback in the West. It is not uncommon today to read articles in mainstream newspapers and magazines with titles such as, "Marx is back." The rehabilitation of Marxism reached new heights recently with the publication of Terry Eagleton's new book entitled, "Why Marx Was Right." Now, please, imagine the outrage if a major American academic were to publish a book with the title, "Why Hitler Was Right."